Hello, I'm Dr. Janine Barry, naturopathic doctor, and today I'm talking about 6 reasons that prove you may be vitamin D deficient. So some of these reasons, of course, would be, yes, lack of sunshine. So if you clearly do not go out in the sun, and especially in the summer months, that's when here in North America, we're going to get the best exposure to the rays of the sun, but in talking about, not having that natural sun exposure on our skin, if you just don't go outside, and most people that work or they're indoors most of the day, we're simply not getting that active, making of that vitamin D on our skin. So this is a big factor. Another reason would be because of clothing. So we cover up, and of course the colder it gets, usually the more clothing that we wear, and in the winter we know that we're not getting that proper UVB penetration into our skin. So using even clothing, a lot of people in different cultures as well, they use and are covered up with their traditional garments that they have covered up their skin. And this is something that I find so interesting, that, how are they getting that exposure? And when I've traveled to several African countries, it was really interesting that, in their culture, you would think they're outside and getting close to the equator, getting so much natural sunlight every day. It simply isn't the case. Everybody stays indoors, air-conditioned, comfortable settings, and simply they do not go outside. So they are at high risk, especially with darker skin. For those, cultures that live close to the equator, typically the skin is much darker, and now there is that definite risk for having that vitamin D deficiency. So the use of sunscreen as well. So certainly we've heard, and please check out my whole other show all about the benefits of the sun, that I have broken it down, and it's really interesting to note in that show that I talked about the misconception as to getting skin cancer, and these misconceptions as to sun exposure and actually causing skin cancer, when there's a lot of evidence that actually shows the opposite. And the sun and natural exposure to sunlight has very protective effects for our immune system, but also for our vitamin D production, which we're talking about today. So there's there's a bit of a disconnect there in the literature, and what some would have you believe, that the sun is not healthy for you. Actually, the opposite is true, and I'm a huge proponent of getting natural sunlight. But when we use sunscreen, of course, we're blocking those UVA and UVB rays, which we need to make that vitamin D. So again, setting ourselves up for that vitamin D deficiency. Now, another reason, which I touched upon a few seconds ago, was because of our skin color. So, myself having lighter skin, I would be considered probably the fair type, and it would only take me about 5 to 10 minutes of that UVB exposure with that strong exposure in the sun of the noontime sun in the summertime to make my adequate amount of vitamin D for that next 24 hours. And that's all that it would take. And I could make, and we'll get to the numbers in just a second, how many I use in that short amount of time. But as compared to someone with a darker skin, so for instance, the darkest skin being black, skin would take up to 90 minutes to create and have that exposure for 90 minutes in the sun to create that same level of international units of vitamin D. So it goes to show you that the darker your skin tone, the longer exposure you would need in the natural sunlight of that UVB. So when the sun is the strongest, usually around noon, and depending on where you live, then that would be, what would be indicated. So most people, I don't think, are getting that level of sun exposure, and of course exposing enough of the body to be able to get that. So really, less than 15% of your body should be covered in those instances, and that means a little, Speedo bathing suit for the guys, or a tiny bikini for the women, to be able to cover the parts that you want to cover, but the rest of your skin should be exposed. So most people are not doing that, certainly, to get their D exposure every day. Now, another reason would be dietary deficiencies. So if you're simply not eating food, so certainly the further you are from the equator, the more of the fish and mushrooms would be another source. We're going to get to the whole list of the sources of vitamin D in a few moments, so stay tuned for that. But, you know, it could be because you simply don't eat these foods in your diet that you may become deficient. Thanks for joining me. If this video helped you to learn something new today, please give me a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And hit that subscribe button so you always get my newest and latest uploads here on YouTube. Be sure to leave your questions and comments below. I would love to hear from you, and I will see you next time. Remember to always take care of your good health and do it naturally.